Hi everyone, how's it going? Got 3 really good stories tonight, so hang on to your hats. You're probably going to hear a rooster crow at some point in this video. Just pay no attention to it. He was just feeling his oats that day that I recorded this, and I couldn't shut him up. How do you shut up a rooster? I have no idea. So I thought I'd give you a heads up on that. If you hear a rooster, if you'd like to comment about it, just go right ahead. Tell me that you heard a rooster in the story. And I know I'm going to get some comments on that, and that's fine. All right, let's get into some Bigfoot stories. All right, here we go. All right, this next story is from a 46-year-old man who with his brother has an encounter in California with a Bigfoot. I love these retro type encounters because it lets us know that, hey, Bigfoot actually people were actually having encounters with Bigfoot before the internet, believe it or not. He writes, my brother and I had an encounter with a Bigfoot camping with some friends in the California mountains. I am 46 and my brother is 45, and this took place when I was 10 years old. We are from Indiana, and we had no idea what a Bigfoot was, or we had never even heard of Bigfoot. Being from Indiana, no one here talks about them. My dad took a job in California, and we moved there, and we made friends with the neighbors. We liked going over to his house. They had 2 large Dobermans, and we liked watching them do tricks. Our friend's dad had those dogs canine command trained, and they were afraid of nothing. One weekend, they asked me and my brother if we could go camping with them, and our parents said it was okay. We were excited beyond belief. 2 boys from Indiana going camping in the mountains. It took about 4 hours to get there, and when we got there, we had to hurry to get the tent set up and gather firewood. There was a creek that we camped right next to, and our friend's dad wanted to go fishing for trout. Right across the river, there was a cliff that went straight up. The dogs liked playing in the water, so they were having a good time also. The first night was normal, uneventful, and us kids laid on the ground looking at the stars. There were so many stars, and it looked like you could just reach out and touch them. It got late, so we went to bed and got up the next morning, and our friend's dad was already fishing, and his mom was cooking breakfast, so we sat down and ate breakfast, and so did the dogs. In the afternoon, we started hearing strange noises coming from across the creek, and it spooked everyone, including those big Dobermans. It started screaming, hitting trees, and we looked up there, and I'll never forget what it looked like. We heard our friend's dad say, "What the hell is that?" He said it has to be 8 feet tall. And he went to his truck and got his pistol and put it on his side. And the dogs started whining, and we all looked over at the dogs, and they were peeing on themselves. And these dogs would attack anything if given the command, so they weren't wimpy dogs. We looked back up, and it just stood there staring at us. It was covered in reddish-brown hair, and it started growling at us, and you could feel the deep guttural growls, and the dogs ran up underneath the truck shaking and still peeing on themselves. That creature finally ran off, and we packed up and got the hell out of there. And to this day, my brother won't talk about it, and I've never talked about it because people will think you're on something or you're crazy, so we kept it to ourselves for over 30 years. Another typical sighting off in the distance, apparently dogs, which, dogs will run up and they'll bark at a bear, they'll bark at a mountain lion, they'll bark at other dogs. My dogs run after coyotes. Those are wild predators, but for some reason these dogs will not tangle up with one of these Bigfoots, because I get story after story about dogs, and they just cow down and whimper, and it's kind of funny. It's like a dog has a sense that this thing is an apex predator. But anyway, I thought this was a good story, and again, I love these retro stories. They're great. Thanks, man, for sending that in. This story is from an outfitter in Montana. The man is, I believe, an older gentleman and obviously has plenty of experience in the wilderness out west and in that area. He talks about a rifle that he owns in this story, and he actually sent me some pictures. Now, I don't share pictures and evidence and stuff, but I'm going to throw up the pictures that he sent me of this rifle. It's a big game rifle. I think it's one of the coolest. It's one of the coolest rifles I've ever seen. I think you'll enjoy seeing it, but when I get to it, I'll throw it up. He writes, "I'm a fan of good westerns. The Coen brothers' rendition of True Grit was, in my opinion, an outstanding movie. In one scene, the marshal and Maddie are riding through the woods. They stop and turn to see who is following them. A figure on horseback appeared, and a chill went down my back because it looked like a bear riding a horse. As he got closer, it became obvious that he was a mountain man with a bear skin wrapped around him. If you recall that individual, he is the spitting image of my hunting partner in every way. I live in the Rocky Mountains of northwestern Montana. I'm surrounded by wilderness and national forests, and my hunting partner, we'll call him Nick, lives about a mile from here. We are 80 miles from the nearest city. Nick was raised here. His parents, his grandparents, his great-grandparents all fought the Blackfeet Indians as they homesteaded here. He has a job which allows him a lot of free time, and if he's not working, he's either hunting, trapping, or scouting. His ability to recognize game tracks is next to one. He can spot elk miles away on hilltops and has frequently been chased off of elk kills and away from his traps by grizzly bears. Nick exercised his talents as a professional guide for many years until certain events broke his body up sufficiently as to limit his activities. I'm older than my mother, and my days of wading waist deep in the lower Madison and other large western rivers are over as well. Thus, from a physical standpoint, he and I usually hunt the same type of terrain now, so we've become good friends and hunting companions. Although I've hunted and fished throughout the western states, British Columbia, and Alberta, my passion is fly fishing. Last spring, we were approximately 12 miles back into a wilderness area, scouting for bear and checking out a stream. The road, if you want to call it that, was washed out in many places from heavy snow runoff, and we carefully forged these spots knowing if we got stuck it would be a long night. I was studying a stream raging next to us, wondering how fishable it may be once the spring runoff had subsided. As we approached an old log bridge that was badly deteriorated, but certainly sturdy enough to support my Tundra, Nick told me to stop. I told him we can easily make it over that, but he insisted that we stop, and he refused to cross the bridge. He was not necessarily calm about the situation, and after further inquiry, he related this story to me. In 1984, he was trapping an area approximately 2 miles on the other side of this bridge. The bridge did not exist at that time, and he had to hike in from where the bridge is now located. He had set up a base camp consisting of a lean-to type shelter, an old fuel can for a stove, and hung as many traps nearby for easy access. He had coolers, weapons, food, clothing, and everything he needed for excursions deeper into the wild of Montana. Nick neither is nor has he ever been a man of means. His income is limited, and he spends the greater part of the spring and summer gathering berries, mushrooms, and honey from his hives in order to exist. This particular area consisted of heavy forested ponderosa pines. The lower portions tend to be scarce of limbs, allowing one to see great distances where the terrain allowed. Nick had spent the night in camp, and the next morning was contemplating where he was going to set his trap, when in between the trees he saw a gigantic Sasquatch walking through the woods. He was massive, and as he walked, he was grabbing trees first with one hand and then the other, like a cross-country skier using his ski poles. The motion was fluid and effortless. He described him as a classic Patterson-Gimlin Sasquatch, with long hair everywhere, a cone head, and standing about 9 feet tall. The creature was moving from Nick's right to his left, quartering away from him. It then stopped turned broadside, and then faced my partner and let out the proverbial roar. He described it as like when those idiot kids drive by with those huge bass speakers in their car. He said he felt the sound reverberate in his chest and go right through him. There was no doubt whatsoever in Nick's mind that the creature was vehemently ordering him to leave the area. Nick was well armed with a rifle at the time, but didn't even consider raising it. He said he immediately turned and walked the many miles back to his truck, never turning around to look behind him. Despite his meager existence, to this day his camp, snowshoes, traps, coolers, and all of his gear remain at that location, 2 miles or so on the other side of that old bridge. The impact of the encounter left such a profound image on his soul that Nick, to this day, has never crossed that bridge or retrieved his stuff. I volunteered to accompany him to the camp and get his belongings, but he just refuses to go to this very day. Here is a man whose freezer is stocked with elk, antelope, deer, turkey, and bear meat. He was charged by a cougar while bow hunting just 6 months ago. He's had to give up numerous elk and deer kills and defend his traps from marauding grizzly bears. He pretty much shrugs these events off, but he will not go within 2 miles of that area where he saw the Sasquatch. I believe that I will arm up and go get his stuff. I own a custom .458 Winchester Magnum on a Browning frame with a Mauser action that is designed to stop an elephant. It has been carved by a master carver and bears a Sasquatch skull on the stock. I had it made for just such an occasion. I have utterly no desire to shoot one, but I'd like to retrieve my partner's gear and perhaps get a glimpse of this thing. It appears, however, that I'll be going alone. Rest assured, it will be in the daylight, whatever good that will do me. And he signs the letter, and it's awesome. What do you guys think about that rifle? That is the coolest thing. He had that made. Thank you for sharing your buddy's encounter. You know, I've never been in the woods out west. I've been to Sequoia National Park. They're beautiful, man. The air is clean and cool and crisp. I just loved it when we were out there. I'm just not familiar with those type of woods. I kind of live in the humid southern woodlands, and it's a lot different. So you guys are lucky to live out there, but stay away from those Sasquatches. And if you run into that thing, I would love to hear from you. And this last story is from a guy who is from my part of the country. He's in the Mississippi River Delta. He writes, the summer of 1980 in Cryptid County, Arkansas, just across the Mississippi River from Memphis. I was fishing with a friend of mine on a small horseshoe-type lake that was created when the Mississippi River changed course and left a part of the channel behind in a horseshoe-shaped arc. I think he's talking about Horseshoe Lake. There are many of these lakes up and down the river between Memphis and New Orleans. We were fishing for crappie in a 14-foot boat about 7 p.m. It was still bright daylight at this time. We were using a trolling motor and quietly and slowly moving parallel to the bank when we heard some movement in the brush at the lake's edge. We looked up to see the head and shoulders of a human-like creature of some sort. It was covered with dark brown black hair all over except for the face, which was black and wrinkled, and more or less human in appearance. I've always felt it was more human than ape-like, at least in its facial appearance. The shoulders seemed very broad, but we could see nothing below the mid-chest because of the thick underbrush. There was no obvious neck, but that might have been an illusion from the hair. I had the feeling that we'd caught it by surprise. It stared at us for a few seconds and then turned and ran through the trees. It was quickly out of sight, although we could hear its steps, clearly bipedal, long after it disappeared from sight. The entire episode only lasted maybe 10 or 15 seconds. My friend and I took the boat into the dock and retreated to the cabin where we were staying just a couple of 100 yards from the lake. We were very unnerved and talked very little about it. We never saw or heard anything else suspicious. He died a few years ago, and only then did I share my story, and I shared it first with the BFRO. I just told my wife of 37 years a few weeks ago because I was afraid of what she would think. She scoffs at cryptids and anything considered paranormal. She knew my friend well and knew the place, having been there several times. She made very little comment after I finally told her and showed her the BFRO posting. I think she wants to believe me, but she still struggles with the whole concept of Bigfoot. Okay, that was a short story, and it was, for him, very eventful, and for me, it would be very eventful. But here's the deal. People really see these things. I mean, how in the world do you keep it to yourself? I know a lot of people say they see things. They'll see a Bigfoot with a buddy, maybe teamed up turkey hunting, or like this guy was, from a boat, and then they never talk about it. That seems so odd to me. I would be rocking that boat back and forth, up and down. I'd be jumping around going, what was that? I would be going crazy after I've seen something that is supposed to be mythical. And then to be afraid to tell your wife. Here's the point. I think there is so much stigma placed on these encounters that it's, I don't know, it just makes people terrified to tell their stories to people close to them. And I think this channel is giving people an outlet to share some things anonymously. You know, maybe it's to get it off their chest, but maybe it's just to talk about it. Let the world know that they saw something. So I appreciate the gentleman for sending it in. He lives right across the river from where I grew up, and I have fished Horseshoe Lake 100 times, and we used to catch big crappie there, but the last few years it's just been little bitty crappie. But that lake just about went dry at one point, and I guess it's rivers flooded back in there again and maybe brought some bigger fish. But anyway, I'm real familiar with it. Okay, that's going to do it for this video. Thank you all so much for listening, and we'll see you on the next one. Thanks.